Hello, everyone. This is Surviving Business. I am one of your hosts here, Winston Wilson. Hope you all are doing fantastic today. David Wilson will be joining us shortly. As you know, on a Surviving Business show, we believe in business as a force for the common good. So, our goal here today is to really talk about ways we can help you as a business achieve your particular goals. And then we talk about an industry, and we have a lot of time and a lot of fun talking about that. And then about a specific thriving business. So we do all of these three things. So if you are interested in being part of Surviving Business, we'll ask you to do a couple things. First thing is just send us a note saying, "Hey, I'm interested in what you guys are doing. I want to be part of it." And we will go ahead and we will send you a note and we'll say, "Hey, what your business is, what are you doing, and maybe we can help you. Maybe we can help you directly." And then from there, if you are having a particular challenge in your business, please let us know that as well, because we'd love to be able to help you with that. Our goal is at this point in our careers is to really spend time with you, understanding how we can help you as a small business owner. We believe that at this time in history, it's the best time to be in business. Every single one of you that hear our voices should be saying to yourself, how can I get involved and how can I start a business and how can I be part of that? So, with that being said, I'm going to go kick it off, see if David is ready to join us today. Let's see if David is ready. David, are you with us today?
Yes, I am.
All right, great to have David with us. So, like I said to everyone there, please make sure you are down with us. And we're going to jump right into our conversation today. And one of the things that we wanted to talk to everyone about today was to talk about when you're starting a business, what are some of the considerations you should have as far as what type of entity to form? Of all the questions I get asked, this is like question number two. So first of all, it's like I got a business and I want to do X. And then the next question is, what should I do? Should I create a corporation? Should I create a nonprofit? Should I create an LLC or partnership? All of these things are like question number two. And it's legitimately should be question number two. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Dave, I'm going to let you to kind of kick off your thoughts. And while we do that, I'm going to share something directly, specifically from the IRS's website, because my opinion is that a lot of people will come to me. They say, "Well, my lawyer says this, my lawyer says that," and I'm not saying anything against lawyers. Lawyers are fantastic people, but make sure you do your own research when it comes to your own business to make sure you are getting your appropriate value. Every time you talk to the lawyer, it's going to cost you money. Like every conversation is going to cost you some money. So make sure you know what you're doing. So Dave, I'm gonna turn it over to you. When someone's coming to you and say, "Hey, I want to start a business. What kind of business I should form?" What are some of the things you would share with them?
So the first thing I'd like to share with them is what are you planning on getting out of the business, right? You want to look kind of at your own finance and see how you yourself, how you generate income currently, right? Because once you start your business, all of this is going to have a mild impact on that, right? So I know that you've all heard go the LLC, right? Or go the LLC route. That's the most simple, most straightforward, and it does have a lot of benefits, right? So you start up an LLC. If it's a single person LLC, a lot of times it acts as a pass through. So you're still filing your taxes regularly, but you end up being able to write off whatever is a business expense. But maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you just want to start a business and just have a business, right? And you can do that and have what's called a sole proprietorship, right? Where it's just solely owned by you. You don't have to worry about filing taxes quarterly like what you would in an LLC. However, you're not quite as protected as you are in an LLC. LLC stands for Limited Liability Corporation for anybody who doesn't know. Now that's different than a C corp, right? So a corporation would be a full corporation where you in both of these you should have an entire board and all of these others. But once you go into a C corp, you become more your regulatory filings become a little bit different. Your tax filings also become different. You can't file them as a pass through. Everything goes directly through the corporation itself. Then there's the great partnership, right? So when you have your buddy and you want to start up a business and you guys want to do it together, you have the option of going into a LLC. And if you go into LLC, make sure that both of your names are on it, right? So that, one of you guys don't end up, having to bear the brunt if things don't go great with the LLC. Especially, when tax time comes, if things are going good, you don't want the other member not to have any tax liability. And you also want everything to kind of be written out. Who owns what, right? And this is similar to what's going to happen in this partnership, right? So when you have a partnership, make sure that, there are a lot of informal partnerships that happen where somebody's giving money, somebody's giving talent. You haven't decided how you're going to break up the money when it starts coming in, and then all of a sudden things just start going haywire. The most important thing is that you need to make sure that even though it might be your best friend, it could be your brother, it could be your sister, when you start getting income, you want to start figuring out exactly what part of the ownership you have within this corporation, within the partnership. Of course, if it's a sole proprietorship, it should just be you, right? But you want to understand where we sit, right? And do you need a lawyer to come in and draft the documents for your LLC, for your partnership, for your sole proprietorship? Not really, not in this day and age, right? A lot of this stuff can be done by simple things that are online. You can go to what's your favorite place to go, Winston?
LegalZoom. I go for everything there, unless it's complex, right? So if you've got lots of people involved, to the comments that you were making earlier about partnerships and how many people are involved. So if it's like 2 or 3 people involved, and this is probably where the lawyers really come into play, is that when you think about states, you think about where people are in different states, that becomes a tricky thing. So if you've got a couple of partners and they're in different states, you probably need to engage a lawyer at that point, because if you're in one state or the other, the laws associated with any kind of entities change state by state. Where, for example, where I'm at in Georgia, one of the great benefits of Georgia that I appreciate is that it's pretty simple to start a business. It's not particularly complicated. And I do like that deregulatory kind of view of this state. But other states, it might be different. So that's just a key thing to think about when you're thinking about creating an entity. Other thing, go ahead.
Yeah, and as you speak about states, right? So every state has their independent laws, and when you are looking at opening up your corporate, if you're doing like an LLC, for instance, right? When you're looking to open up the LLC, one of the things that you want to make sure with the LLC is that you're following, you're actually incorporating in that's going to be just to what you want to do, right? So you want to do a little bit of homework and some research into states you can possibly file in, what states you can open in, because there will be tax liability potential tax liability that you may be able to forego by opening in a different state. Different regulatory filings that you may be able to avoid by opening in a different state than where you actually reside. But there could be some issues that come along with that, like as far as opening a bank account and some other things. You want to just make sure you get all your ducks in a row and understand what you're getting yourself into before you just jump in there, right?
Yeah. And the question I get, thank you for all of that. You gave some fantastic guidance on all of that. The question I get asked a lot is about nonprofits. And so people are always saying, should I open a nonprofit versus a regular corporation, or an entity? The question you have to ask yourself is that, what is my nonprofit's vision? How am I giving and serving? It is not a money-making enterprise. It's not, in that regard, you're doing it to serve some part of your community. So if that's your overall vision in regards to what your entity is, then a nonprofit probably does make sense. There's obviously some benefits of having a nonprofit, specifically when it comes to taxes and those kind of things. There's an overall goodwill piece, but you shouldn't do it in lieu of having an entity. So if you have a good or a service that you're trying to sell, you should probably have that good or service as an entity, unless that good or service serves the community in some direct way. I think that's the key thing to have. I was at a conversation probably about a couple of months ago, and in the state I am, there was a gentleman who was talking about nonprofits, and he shared that there is at least 40,000 nonprofits in my state alone. That's not a bad thing. Those people are probably doing a lot of good work. They just have to make sure that what you're doing it for is the right thing to be doing, and you're not just doing it as a way to circumvent having a normal entity. So, th-
And just to add, when you do decide, if you are deciding that you want to go the nonprofit route, you have to remember one of the most important parts of a nonprofit is that you're not going to be able to like take retained earnings and keep that dough and decide that you want to pay yourself something extra out and do some dividends or something like that to people that are on the board. No, the nonprofit is going to be run and it has to be run in a way that at the end of the year, whatever, that all of the funds are really depleted, right? And then you're thinking about how you're going to keep generating money year after year. So where, your idea is that you're going to be able to go and get federal funding, or if you're going to have, donors that are going to continuously give money, or even if your nonprofit is a money generating entity, right? But you want to make sure that you understand, what's that revenue that's going to come in, or what's those donations that are going to come in that are going to allow for your nonprofit to stay afloat.
Yeah, I think that that's all fantastic info. So those of you out there, create an entity. Do it tomorrow. I mean, the LLC is the most advantageous one of all of them. You heard David share what some of those reasons are for doing that. I've heard people give advice about, if you have certain level of assets, to create LLCs for those assets. And so that's something that that's a good way or good reason to get a lawyer involved. So if you're trying to take some assets that you own and make LLCs for that, I think you should get some advice on that. But do it today. Create an entity today. And like David said, you can start off as a sole proprietorship, but start today. Do something today. So Dave, thank you for all of that. That's fantastic. Any more comments on this section of SB?
Yeah, the most important part is that because you choose an entity today doesn't mean that you can't be a different entity tomorrow, right? So don't allow for that to be a hindrance for, you actually going out and starting your business, right? So you decide you want to go and do something, okay, you're out there, you're doing something as a sole proprietor, and then tomorrow you decide that you want to LLC it. You can now once you LLC it, moving into a partnership and moving into other entities, that's going to be grainy, right? Because you're going to have to figure out how you can do it. And then you may need to definitely consult a lawyer, or spend a lot of time on Google trying to figure it out. But it can be done, right? It just requires for you to rethink the business that you're doing, right? So don't allow for an entity to be the stopper, right?
That's right. Philosophically, this is one of the things that I get into a lot is that United States, we got all kinds of issues and all of that. But one of the cool things about where we all live at is that we can create a business tomorrow and start taking what our talents or expertise are and making sure that we're sharing it with the world. That's a fantastic thing to be part of this country, where today, if you're doing something today and you say, tomorrow I want to learn how to do something else, you can do that tomorrow. And so please do that. So our next section, and for those of you who get the final cut, you'll hear the super dope sound effects that I'll make for that, but we don't have the sound effects for this section. So this is where we talk about an industry or an entity or service that we want to talk about as something that we have either a concern about or we just want to talk about as far as how it's going forward in the future. And today we are taking Tesla versus Auto America. And so I had a fantastic graphic there that I'll put on the final cut of it. But from my perspective, I'll kick it off by saying Tesla is a fantastic company. They just are. I am so glad for them. They do so many amazing things in our country. They've created this amazing supercharger network that is across the entire width of the country. They're really phenomenal, and I really appreciate everything that Elon Musk is doing as far as making sure that we as a country and as a world think about going to the next step of car manufacturers, and that's electronic cars. Full disclosure, I have a hybrid myself, and so I have a certain level of bias associated with this conversation. But I think it's fantastic. I think that if you go into Tesla, this is the thing I always think about, Dave, when I go into a Tesla, that if someone goes and does a test drive in a Tesla, they're going to buy one. It's got that kind.
If they can afford it.
I think they're going to. Well, if they get that far, they've got some justification in their mind in regards to how I'm going to do this and how I'm going to buy this car. I gotta get this car. I think there's a magic about it because when you walk into it, even when you just see them in showrooms in different cities, and you walk into it, man, this car is phenomenal. It just really is. And we'll talk about the fact that they're doing amazing things, but they're also, and this is a part where my own personal bias comes in. I'm so glad that the other automakers here in the United States of America are taking a cue from Tesla and really focusing on EVs. So, Dave, kick off with your conversations about Tesla.
So, a lot of times, I always like to go way back in the days as if I'm older than you. But yeah, we can
You're not
think
older
back.
than me? You're not older than me?
Yes, I'm not older than you. I just have hair on my face, therefore I look great. We can think back to when we were very young, right? And the gas guzzling machines that used to be created in the 70s, in the 60s, and the 80s, right? And these gas guzzling machines, for moments where gas became really, really expensive, they, auto manufacturers say, you know what, let's try and create a car that can actually make it really far on less gas, right? So you had like what was it, like the Gremlin? I think it was pretty good on gas.
Oh gosh.
And then you had like the you had like the Honda Excels when they came out. Those were okay on gas. But then you had, what was that car that came out that did like 50 miles to the gallon in the 90s?
50 miles to the gallon.
I think Cherry had one, and I blew like the alternator.
I can't remember that car.
It was a little small car that was created, and it did like 50 miles to the gallon. And we're talking
talking about like an Escort or something.
It wasn't an Escort. It wasn't an Escort. It was, I think, wasn't made by Hyundai. I can't remember, but I remember there was that car, and there was another car that was like really good on gas mileage, right? So they were doing that like in the early 90s, right? So early 90s, you're able to get these cars that are doing like this really great gas mileage, and then gas prices tanked, right? It became super cheap to make gas, and then a great innovation came out where GMC said, "Yo, we can make this Hummer that you could drive around the street in, a Hummer, just like what they have in the military." And did they try and change that Hummer a lot? No. They said, this Hummer.
I remember the car. I think the car is called a Toyota Tercel. I think that's the car you're talking about.
Toyota Tercel. Yeah. It may have been the Tercel.
Yeah.
Somebody fact check us. We might be wrong, but
I think that's the one. I think it got a lot of gas. It got a lot of miles to the gallon. I remember that car.
Yeah. But there were a couple of them, right? And so they came out this Hummer, and the Hummer got like 8 miles to the gallon, and this is what they were tracking. So it was probably even getting less than that. Brand new car that you paid like $60,000-$70,000 for, 8 miles to the gallon, and people were buying it left and right. Everybody decided they wanted an SUV, and all of the SUVs were getting horrible gas mileage, right? And it took for us to like go through the point where like oil prices went to like $120 a gallon, which meant that after Hurricane Katrina.
Oh yeah, I remember that. That was gouging everywhere. Yeah,
it took Hurricane Katrina where gas prices were just ridiculous. $5 a gallon in Atlanta, where it used to be 98 cents a gallon, right? Which is just ridiculous for you to try and say this is the only way I can get around, but now I got to pay 5 times the amount just at the tank, right? Not to mention like to get oil changes or whatever else I got to do to the car. So this forced the hand, right? This forced the hand of innovation. This forced the hand of, even regulators, or, the regulatory industry to say, like, how can we change this, right? But it took a forward-thinking mind, and it took innovation to happen for us to create something that's as beautiful brought to the market, right? Now, when Tesla first brought the car to the market, everybody was doing, different types of hybrid technology, right? So, the big hybrid was to do like the hydrogen gas, right? To try and see if we could use a different type of fuel, or to do the electric and gas model, so like the Prius became super popular, and the Prius is another great vehicle for the way that it was made. I remember I rented one of those things when I was in Monterey, and I couldn't believe I fit for that trip. I was driving around 5 dudes, and I was the smallest. And I'm not a small guy, so I don't know how I look on camera to you people, but I'm not a small guy. I mean, I'm not the biggest guy, but I'm like 5'10", 5'11", at the time, like 230, 240, and I was the shortest and the smallest most of the time. Like, I wasn't even heavier than any of these guys. And they're like in the back seat, 3 of them comfortably.
I
there
love
for
Prius.
6 days, and I filled the tank up once.
I love Prius.
It was $14.
I can't remember. They're celebrating some anniversary here coming up. I don't know if it's 10 years or 15 years or something, but they have done such an amazing job, because they were the ones who kind of pioneered that recharge technology that most of the hybrid have, where you're recharging as you're driving, which extended the mileage of the car. The thing that I loved that was really interesting is that they were at a hybrid where you pretty much put gas in it for the most part, but the car recharged itself. And I think that led other companies to do that technology. And I think even Tesla does it. If I remember correctly, Tesla has their own recharge thing, and it does it really well. It does it really well. I think that one of the things that I think that we're at a certain point is that, and this probably started with the Obama administration, where they spent some time saying, hey, we're going to change the regulatory necessary requirements of cars, and they're going to raise the gas level up. I think that some of that got repealed through the Trump administration, but I think they said, well, instead of it being like 20 miles to the gallon, going back to your story about the SUVs and all of that, they were like, hey, we're going to raise it up to 35 miles a gallon, which I think, was great for Tesla. And it was great for all those others who had hybrid cars at the time. And I think that is really pushing it along. And the one piece I really enjoy, I think is the most awesome thing, is that when people are making a product these days, the product doesn't work until people want to buy it. And I think now we're at a point where people actually want to buy electric cars. They know the value of them. They've seen the benefits of them, whether it's all of the gas that saves, based on that whole story about gas prices and how that thing fluctuates a lot. Or the fact that there is some environmental impact. I don't know if the environmental impact is as much as people say it is, but I know that it's better than fossil fuels. I know it's a little bit better than that.
Well, an interesting thing what you said there, right? Is like you look at it and you say, all right, so Trump, he said, all right, we're going to take away, this limit of 35 miles to a gallon that we're supposed to achieve. I think it was like 2025 or something like that. But all of the car makers said, what? Yes, thank you for that, but we want to push forward, and we actually want to achieve greater than what those milestones were. And a big part of the reason why they said that was because they could see the value in doing it, right? Not just the value for being able to compete with the Tesla, but because if they're able to create these new technologically advanced cars, guess what happens to the old cars? They all go, right? So now we have an industry where, so if I had a 1970 something car, I really don't want to drive that car anymore, because that car, I still got to use fuel to fill it up, right? If everything goes electric, everybody has to get a new car. You're forced to get a new car. And then you're able to drop cars like your Apple, right? And you're like, well,
Plan obsolescence.
Huh?
Right. The same plan obsolescence is the key of any business these days, especially when you're making a product. Make the product so that people got to go back and get more product.
Exactly.
And you're right. They were getting to a point with cars where the technology was getting so good that they were like, wait a minute. People aren't going to come back and buy the car unless we make a reason for people to come back to the showroom to buy more cars.
Exactly. People were holding on to their cars longer and longer. They weren't breaking down as much. Hyundai messed up the model. Okay, we can make cars that don't really work that well, and it'd be okay because when they came with the 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty, everybody had to up their game and say, like, we got to make better cars too.
Hyundai went from being one of the worst car manufacturers to being one of the best from an overall rating perspective. And that's because they bet on themselves. They're like, yo, we're going to make a 10,000 mile, no, 10,000, what is 100,000 miles, 10 years? That means that we don't want people coming in here for service. So we got to make the cars better. We just do.
That's where you see leadership, right?
Yeah.
I think
I wonder who the leader is. I wonder who the leader is at Hyundai. That's one thing I haven't researched. I will say that one of the things that I think that I like is that the auto manufacturers are figuring it out. So I'm going to share for the audience that I'm pretty excited about the fact that all of the big three, and I really just focus here on GM and also with Ford, they're all got a plan. They all got a plan in regards to what does their EV strategy look like, which I thought was great. I was a little bit bummed a few years ago, or maybe it was a year ago, when GM decided to stop making my own hybrid car. And I was like, what are they going to do with that technology? And they didn't get rid of it. So if you saw the news, they're making a Hummer EV. They're continuing to focus on the technology for the Chevy Bolt and the Bolt EUV, which is like a bigger Bolt. Going back to a comment you made earlier, all these people were migrating to SUVs, right? So if you think about this a few years ago, some of the car manufacturers said, well, we're not going to make a lot of sedans anymore. And so now they're figuring out how do they incorporate that technology, this hybrid technology, into SUV-like crossover type vehicles, which I think is phenomenal. I think that's
I think Escape was one of the first ones. And notice that this coming out, it's not going to be the gas gouger of the previous Hummer.
From what I understand,
which is a great thing.
From what I understand, this thing is going to be able to get like 300 miles or so on EV range, which I think is fantastic. I might be wrong about that. I think it's like 400 miles. And the key thing for people to get this adoption going on, in my opinion, is that people want to be able to know how far can they drive before they have to drive or fill up again. So if you remember back with the car, with the gas, people would be like, how far can I get on my gas? And people would buy cars that had more gas mileage or more gas tanks and all that kind of stuff. And so now they're trying to figure out how can they do that with these EVs. And the thing I love, and this is not a plug per se for like the Biden administration, but one of the things I did like that he said is that there's this goal of trying to create a whole network of EV charging stations all across the country. And I was like, man, when that happens, people are going to be buying EVs. There is no doubt about it. It's still going to be difficult in some places like cities, right? So if you're like a city like New York, until they figure out how to make EV stations in places in New York, it's probably going to still be hard for people to have those there. But in a lot of parts of the country, I think it's going to be a great time. Right now, I'm showing this Hummer thing you were talking about. I tell you, for the first time ever in a long time, and I don't intend on buying a car anytime soon, but when I saw the commercial for this car, like I got excited, like for real. I was like, what? They making a Hummer EV? That, it's kind of crazy in a way, because looking at this car cannot fit in my garage. It cannot. So I couldn't live here. So I couldn't buy this car, but it got me excited in a really, really good way. It really did.
You could always leave it out the garage. I mean, it doesn't have to go in the garage.
Why do I have a garage? My mind started going. Then people will be like, wait a minute, do I need to get another house? No. So you start having these questions in yourself. But yes, you're right. I could leave that outside the house.
Yeah, you use the garage for other stuff. But I mean, the interesting thing is that so we got the big three, right? And then we have this crowded market of all of these people that are creating their own electric vehicles, right? So, everything from, in China, you got all of these companies. In America, we got companies. We got Lucid, there's NIO, there's this company, there's that company. And all of these small guys are coming in. They're saying they're going to be innovative, and they've created different approaches to trying to create these electronic vehicles. A lot of these guys get up by the big guys, right? The big guys see a piece of technology that they really, really like, and they buy it, right? Or, a company that's cash heavy, like a Google, that's always wanted to have their autonomous vehicle, finally gets their wish, right? They get an electronic car company that did a great job of creating, a vehicle, and they're able to embed their technology, and then Google says, all right, let's partner with you and buy you out, or let you be there. But it's going to take that kind of cash infusion, if you ask me, for a lot of those guys to really be able to compete on a worldwide level for some time. I think that there's a possibility they can do well and have some growth, but in the case where you sell a car and the car doesn't work, 2 years later, let's say I bought a Lucid car, which is, looking at those cars, they look awesome. But let's say I bought the car and it stops working, and I moved from the place where I was able to buy the car, and now I'm in like some rural place like in Kentucky. How am I going to get the car fixed?
Yeah, Lucid is a beautiful car. It really is. And you make a good point. I was watching this documentary, like when cars first started 100 or some odd years ago. There's at one point 458 different car manufacturers. And so there was an obvious bubble that all of those people could not survive. It's not 450 EV makers at this point, but it's a lot. To your point, there are a lot of them, and many of them cannot survive with one thought process. In my opinion, one thought process is that if someone figures out how to go to where the people are from a pricing perspective, then I think they got a shot. In my opinion, going back to Tesla is got a phenomenal stock price. I showed their website here a second ago where they got the solar panels and the solar roof, and they got all this other stuff that they're doing. But their addressable market, going back to your comments about where you can get it serviced, how long can you own it, how much does it cost to service, all of those things are real things for people as they mature in their life cycle of owning their vehicle. And I'm saying to myself, go ahead.
I was going to just add, not to mention that the regulators are speaking about how are they going to add this additional tax for EV owners, right? EV car owners, so that they aren't just driving around for electricity prices, which to me is like, it's very weird that they're contemplating this weird tax.
I hate when regulators do that. I hate when lawmakers try to get paid off of innovation. Yep. It just stifles innovation. It just does. Even in the state that I'm in, when I bought my car many years ago, there was this tax credit that you got for doing it, that kind of thing. And it gets to a certain point where that tax credit is not applicable. But now I've heard recently that they've passed a law, because you would go in and you register your car every year, right? Everyone does a registration in every state. But now they've passed an additional tax on top of the regular tax just because you bought an EV car for no reason. There's no reason for that. They're trying to stifle people from buying an EV cars because they want people to buy, I guess, big, giant, massive pickup trucks or whatever they're buying. That's not going to stop pickup trucks from being sold. And I was saying, why are they trying to get paid off of people? That just really got me pissed off, because I'm like, no one does anything. I was already pissed off with the registration fee to begin with, and now they want to charge people an additional fee just because they're buying a car that's helping the bloody environment. That was frustrating, to say the least.
I feel your frustration, but I don't have a hybrid. But I still feel bad for it's one of those things, like, why is this regulation coming out? I would say that I'm not a conservative at all, but that's one thing that I would agree with conservatives on. Meanwhile, it's probably some conservatives that are passing the bill. But normally what they would say is stop the regulation, right? We shouldn't be taxing people for just because we want to tax them. right? It's like, yeah, you made more money than someone else, so we should just tax you because you made more money than someone else. There's some rules of efficacy, and that makes sense when it comes to that, but with the EV market, it doesn't, because you already pay taxes on your electricity, right? Everybody pays tax on electricity, and you still have to pay for the electricity that you're using, and then you purchased a car that is going to use that electricity for that reason. So if now I have to pay more money for this car, maybe I don't get the car, right? I don't know.
Which is
It
probably
just
their
makes
goal.
life more
Which
difficult.
is probably their goal on some weird way is that, well, maybe people will buy gas cars because that'll help the oil industry. And I'm saying to myself, that's so stupid because going back to this whole conversation is about the fact that automobile manufacturers in the United States of America are moving to make electrified vehicles.
Yep.
So if you love American vehicles, which I do personally, and they're all moving that way, then don't do anything to stifle them from doing that.
Yeah.
You just cannot.
I mean, it's one of those interesting things, right? So there's a limited supply of oil on the planet, right? And we know that once we deplete all of the oil that's on the planet, it's just gone, right? And we don't know what the real ramifications of all of this oil that's supposed to be under the ground disappearing from being under the ground. We see quakes, we see all of these things that happen in the fracking places where we're seeing tectonic plates shifting and all this other stuff. I'm not the scientist that can sit here and say that that's exactly the reason why any of this stuff is happening, but there's a part of my mind that says, it could be possible, right? That could be a contributing thing, right? And not to mention, people still need oil to heat their houses. Those cars still need oil to be created, right? There's still tons and tons of applications for oil. And how about oil finding another use for oil that can really help mankind, right? Why would we keep on doing something that we've been doing for 100 years now? 100 plus years we've been driving automobiles with gas. Where is the innovation in that? Humans aren't we're not the creatures that are created just to do the same thing over and over and over and over and over until eternity. We need to
That's
move on, right? How do we ever get to Star Trek if we keep on using gas cars?
And there's
That would,
technology. You said something earlier that there's even more technology beyond electrification that exists, and so we need to do anything we can to help the daggone planet. And I know I'm okay with telling everybody out there that I'm a quasi environmentalist. I'm not one of those people who like goes and hugs trees, but anything we can do to help the environment, especially if we can do it with technology that we have, then let's do it. Let's use the technology that we have today to do it. And cars, as we all know, cars expend a lot of whatever you call it, pollutants that are out there. And so, if we can do that, and we can only take, right now, it's probably 1 or 2% of everybody in the world that has a electric car. It's not a lot of people that has that. And if we can move that to like 5% or 10%, and then that has an effect. You think about a lot of cities now, like the city that I'm here in Atlanta, they use natural gas and other technology for their buses. And
mm-hmm.
so if we think about these government entities that are out there, how can they take how can they take the vehicles that are out there and make them electrified? That's part of the conversation too. I know we're veering off from our conversation around Tesla and auto manufacturers here in the US, but I think it's all interrelated in that regard.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
they're all
so. So one of the conversations I have with my wife quite often, when she sees companies doing things that are altruistic or good for the environment, or good for their social image, she's like, yeah, they're just doing that because it's good PR. And I'm like, well, there's this thing in business now that's very important. And luckily enough, I just got my MBA. And, it's like 5 years now, but it's not that long ago. So there was this thing where sustainability, social sustainability, it's like a huge thing in business now, because all businesses realize that if they're not doing things that allow for society to do better and to improve the current environment, in many ways, not just environment as in like the trees and the grass and the soil, but also socio political environment, any type of environment that you could think of. It's a hindrance to their business.
Yeah, it breaks my
Businesses
heart.
do best in utopic societies, right? So if everything's going great and everybody feels great, there's no coronavirus and everybody has a job and everybody's doing great, every business flourishes. That's where businesses want to operate. And it took a lot of corporations a lot of time to see that, but now they see it. And we can see that in the car manufacturers. The car manufacturers, no, we're not going to roll back the time. We see that Tesla's created these cars that if we don't change what we're doing, especially the big three, are like, if we don't change what we're doing, everyone's going to be buying Teslas, because Tesla will figure out a way to mass market. They've tried to mass market, and they're going to continue to try, and they're going to continue to get downgrade, because even the cheapest Ford car that you can go and get is starting to get pretty pricey. So
that's what I was mentioning. That I think that there's the goal here is that these guys got to figure out how to get lower, right? How to get like I've heard Tesla talk about the $25,000 car that they're going to build at some point in the future.
Mm-hmm.
That is that's the tipping point in my view. Once that happens, people are going to it's going to be hard for people to make the decision about gas versus electric easy. If there's a $25,000 car out there, especially with the secondary market that you mentioned earlier, and you start to see some of their own cars get to that point, people are going to be ready. They're going to be like, this is it. Right now, the challenge that they have and GM has, I'm showing the Mustang Mach-E here, which is 40 grand, is that there's an addressable market that exists, that people who can afford $45,000 cars exist, but they have to keep repeating. They have to move from a Mach-E to a Tesla Model 3 or SOY. They've got to move there. And so they're fighting for the same group of people. Where the biggest market that exists are the people who can spend $25,000 or $30,000 for a car. That's a big market of human beings. And the thing I like about what Chevy is doing is that their Chevy Bolt that I talked about, the most expensive one of those, can top out at 40 grand, but you can get in there for like 32, 33, 35 grand. And now, will they get the mass market? I don't think so, because they're not advertising it like they should. They're advertising the things that give them the margin. So they know they got to get to that 35 mile an hour limit. So they're like, we got to have a bunch of Bolts being sold, and they sell them like a ton of them in California. But we also got to sell those GMCs, Suburbans, and all those other cars that exist, those pickup trucks that are 100 grand, because we get a whole bunch of margin with those guys. And so when they get to the 25 grand tipping point, and whether it's GM or Ford or Tesla, my opinion, whoever does that first wins, because they're going to get a lot of the people at that point.
Yeah, I think they get a lot of people as long as infrastructure is built out for it. Right. I mean, and that they don't diminish the product to do it. Right. So, if the 25,000 version all of a sudden is like you gotta roll up your windows with your hand.
going back to the Pinto you were talking about earlier, the Gremlin, I think was the word you used earlier. That was a car.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that for certain people that may be watching us or probably aren't watching us, they're too young to even know what that is, right? What do you mean rolling it up with your hand? How do you roll up a window with your hand?
Right, there was a crank. For those of you who don't know, there was a crank at the side of the door that you would literally roll it up. It was good for your biceps and your shoulders. You would roll it up and down, and the window would go up and down. The great benefit for that is that stuff really ever broke down. You really, it just kept working forever. It's just a crank. It was a mechanical crank.
Yeah, and if it did break down, you could take off the door and you could just fix it yourself, right? You didn't have to.
Right. Now the cars are computer cars, right? Where it's not like that. No one can really work on their car directly anymore like they used to.
Very difficult for the old time mechanic. He has to do a lot of professional development to stay on par to figure out how he's going to work on these cars.
Yeah. The one thing I will say that Tesla has to work on is that I recently saw in Consumer Reports that the Model 3 was one of the top 10 vehicles in their report, as far as, in Consumer Reports. However, on JD Power, which is like reliability and those kind of things, Tesla as a company continues to rank towards the bottom. And for someone like me who loves their vehicles and what they're doing, I can't buy one because I can't be in a shop with my car. My car is for when I need to get in. I gotta get in and go. I don't want to be in the shop ever until just to change out
Yeah.
some routine maintenance stuff. I can't. I've seen all these videos where guys with the door handles don't work, or their phone doesn't connect to the thing, or the Bluetooth inside of it's not working right, or there's like this really material stuff at the top of it that's not working. I was like, yo, Tesla, y'all gotta get your act together. You can't be like that. The car that I have is no challenge like that. I was watching something recently about the Ford Mach-E, which I'll display here, and they had this reliability thing that went on with it, and it had no reliability issues whatsoever with people who bought it. That's how you'll get a person like me to buy that kind of car.
Yeah, I was looking at a review of the Ford Mach-E, and I was really surprised that the reviewer kept speaking about how you can tell that this is a manufacturer of cars for 100 plus years because of the quality and detail of the workman and the craftsmanship. I'm like, is he making a slithering like comment to say that Tesla isn't finished? Like some of the cars aren't finished to that same capacity? I don't know. I haven't owned one, so I haven't been around one that long. So maybe that's what he's getting at. That, although when you initially get the car, it looks really great, you end up having these nagging little things that just weren't done right on the vehicle.
That for me will drive me nuts. Yeah, I can't deal with that. That was just, and it's nagging enough. And I think you made the right comment there about it being nagging. But if my door handle doesn't work and I got to get in, I got to go to work and I got to figure out how to do something like that, and I got to drive like that, and I got to keep thinking about my door handle the whole time,
all day,
or the wind noise because it's not finished a certain way. The wind noise is coming inside of my car, and I know I got to go to the dealer. All of a sudden, my whole day is consumed in my brain about having to go to the dealer to fix that. It's 2021. People should make cars that work right and that are finished. And then, so I started off this conversation saying how much I appreciate Tesla, and that's just my little feedback about what they need to do and how they get themselves because that's going to come home to roost at some point. When these other cars come out, when these Mach-E comes out and those Bolts come out and those Hummers come out, and they don't have those finish challenges that Tesla's having, they're going to lose share. They just are.
Yeah. Well, the great thing about Tesla is that they have, other parts of their business to fall back on. But, I would say some of their things are created with that, kind of like Apple model where it's like, okay, you got a Tesla, you could charge at the Tesla station, and
that's the best part. Your Supercharger network is so fantastic. I love that.
Yeah.
There are people, I've seen stories of people traveling all across the country because they got that network there, and they don't bat an eye. They just find a place to stop and to charge up their car. It charges relatively quickly, like a half an hour, they get a decent charge, and they just keep going from there.
So. Well, I still would have to see, I don't know. I don't know if I'm comfortable enough to drive across the country. I mean, I guess I would be if I had one, because then I would be able to map it out. But I would, you like to kind of just be free and be able to drive wherever you want to go, right? I have to stick to these specific roads to make sure that I actually hit.
Well, we didn't talk about this here, but Ford has with the Ford Mach-E, they've got an agreement with Electrify America to make sure that all of their vehicles can travel through. And Electrify America has this great network as well, and GM is doing the same thing. In my opinion, is that it's sort of like when you traveled, you had to get gas anyway, but you
Yeah.
just have to make sure that there's enough stations, especially when you're on those long haul trips where there's not many places in between. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the other thing is that Tesla does a great job as far as making sure that their vehicles are like between 200 and 300 miles per charge. That's the tipping point because if you get that amount, especially these new ones that are coming out, there's this new Plaid Plus that they're supposed to make next year that can go 400 and some odd miles. The Lucid Air that you talked about, that goes 400 miles. When that starts to happen, people's comfort level or their range anxiety goes down a lot. If I know I can go
Yeah.
400 miles, that means for me, like from where I live here, that means I can go past Charlotte, North Carolina on one charge.
Yeah. Which
That
means that you'll
yeah,
probably be stopping somewhere in like South Carolina to recharge
that's right.
because you're not gonna be comfortable if you were driving a regular car where you'd be like, all right, I'm at quarter tank. I think I could still get like another half an hour driving in with
I
electric
think
vehicle. Like, yeah, I can get 400 miles, but will I ever really get to 350? That's the
I
big
don't
question.
this kind of links to what we were talking about with other places when it comes to movie theaters and retail locations. When those places connect the dots and say, "Hey, well, let's put electric stations here," and people are stopping before they get to 400 miles, and they go and stop at the mall because they
Mhm.
know their phone tells them that's where an electrified station is, or electric charging station is. That's how they're going to grow their business further.
Yeah,
So,
I think it's gonna be like a whole mapping thing that needs to be in the car. I don't know if it's already in there, where it'd be
well,
like, all
if
right,
you have this app called ChargePoint from the ChargePoint stations, I know they're going to go do an IPO through a SPAC here coming up
mm-hmm,
in the near future. It's cool because they will give you the regular GPS that you get from like Google Maps
mm-hmm,
or the Maps application, but they'll overlay charging stations throughout it, and they'll tell you if the station is being used or not used inside
mm-hmm.
of the thing, which I think is fantastic. I think that's cool. Um,
Yeah, I think the thing that I wanted was the connectivity in the car to go further for my car to say like, okay, you have 50 miles left. You need to go and charge at this station that's there. That's
it,
free.
I know the Tesla does that. So the Tesla will tell you where the nearest supercharger is and whether that one's available or not. I know the
Okay.
Ford Mach-E with this Electrify America partnership they have, that does the
Mm-hmm.
same thing too. That tells you exactly where is the next station and how many are open, and this is how much miles you got left. That's the cool
Okay.
thing about buying a car these days is that your cars are computers, and so they have
Mhm.
the same technology that you have in your own house, which I think is
Yeah.
fantastic.
The,
And
but
so,
but to put our father into the conversation, what happens when your computer breaks? Oh, that means your car.
your
What's the
car ain't
implication
working.
for your car?
Your car ain't working. That's, that's
That completely sucks, right?
when I bought my car, which is old timey versus the newer hybrids. I would put people in it, and they would go, "Oh my God, you have a computer in your car." But anyone who has a car these days is way more advanced than my 8-year-old car at this point. It's just, but your car is
Rightly
on
so.
a computer, and I'm sure that even I know he has a new vehicle, relatively new vehicle. That thing is
Mhm.
probably 10 times or at least 5 times more advanced than my own car in regards to
Yeah,
technology is concerned. Um,
yeah, nice.
so more to come. If you have any comments for us about Tesla versus Auto America, we believe in all of these companies. We think they're doing fantastic stuff. If you all who have been watching the show know that these topics seem to be interrelated. That's why it's season 1, because it's all connect the dots on this stuff. So thriving business beat. So this is our section where we talk about businesses that we think are thriving, and it's pretty easy, at least from my view, is that last week we talked about e-commerce businesses thriving. A lot of people have been home, right, for the pandemic, for whether they can't go or their job tells them they can't go, etc. So that has created a rise in people buying computers and computer related stuff. And so, for those of you out there right now, there is a semiconductor shortage for those who did not hedge on semiconductors. And so, car manufacturers, computer manufacturers, etc., are starting to scramble, cell phone manufacturers starting to scramble to figure out where they can get the chips that they need to be able to do that, because more people are buying more stuff because they're at home, they're buying cars, they're buying computers, they're buying microphones, they're buying lighting, they're buying all of these things to be at home. So that's from my view, that's a thriving business, because being at home is not going away. Post pandemic, people are still going to need to do this. We don't need to stream, we don't need to do web conferences. All of that happens. So people are now buying technology that allows them on helps them to do that. So some people may not have ever purchased a microphone for their computer before. People might not have ever purchased a webcam for their computer before. They might have been like, well, whatever my computer got, because I don't use that much anyway. Now everyone is like, yo, I gotta get one of those because I'm gonna be on computer or gonna be on my computer longer than I used to. So the sales of all of that peripheral stuff is going up tons, where people are now getting the right microphone or getting a microphone or getting a right webcam. They're getting all of these things, which has made Amazon and all these companies, Logitech, all these people who sell that stuff, they're doing fantastic stuff. Yeti microphones, fine microphones, all these guys are doing fantastic. So to me, that's our thriving business for this week. People who are buying stuff for their computer.
Yeah, yeah. I would say computer before I even get into that, you know, you didn't do any of the corny sound effects this week. I was looking
What?
forward to them all week. There was
I
no corny sound effects. There was no ba-doop, ba-doop, ba-doop. Yeah, but yeah, you know, that's definitely a thriving business. How could it not be a thriving business? Um, Forego the day of Circuit City and Best Buy being, you know, the stop that you made every time that you left the house to go somewhere as a young man, right? Or a man, right? Now we in the day and age where, for a big part, it seemed like you had all of the gadgets that you needed, right? Here comes coronavirus and you're stuck at home, and all of a sudden you just need more things that are just going to make life at home a little bit easier, right? So, as Winston said, yeah, there's the webcam, there's the mic, but then there's also the PlayStation 5 that comes out, right? The new Xbox that comes out, right? There's still, you know, the innovation is still happening. There's still the new TV that people are getting, right? Because the TV technology is still pushing forward and getting greater, right? So 4K is the standard, you know, where 3 years ago, you know, 1080p was the standard, right? And 4K was looked at as like, okay, will we ever have programming for that? I still don't know if we really have that much programming for it, but you know, 4K is the standard now, so people are still upgrading those TVs. And as we know, TVs now need semiconductors, right? Because every TV is a smart TV, and every monitor is made from an LED. And the LEDs, in order for LEDs to light up, they need to be on a board, right?
They're all
So
computers.
yeah, so everything's a computer, right? You got people that are working from home for their companies, where the companies are actually buying them stuff to say like, okay, we don't know when you're going back into the office. Here, take some new stuff. Buy this new stuff that we didn't have before, and all of your stuff that's in the office that was in the office before is just gonna sit there. Interesting, right? So all that old stuff, so all this old tech, or not even super old tech, but semi old tech. There's a lot of semi old tech that's just out there. It's not being used.
Yeah. So those of you who see, I'm showing a little graphic here, and you can't see it all depending on your screen. You may be able to see it more on the others, but the light blue on this just shows things that have gone down through the quarantine, and the dark blue shows the thing that's going up. And this scattergram shows the biggest bubble being electronic stuff. So that covers up all the stuff you were just talking about. Because I tell you, more electronics are just being sold everywhere. All the stuff we've talked about, I think you were right about like the console games and all that stuff. I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's important stuff. That, everyone's been upgrading computers, even at the same time where companies are usually doing their same cycle of computer rollouts. because of the whole quarantine thing. So they're not even rolling out as fast as they used to. And so all of that is occurring at the same time, which I think bodes well. When I look at this is pretty interesting because you see apparel is going down. I think that's a that's a future episode of Surviving Business to talk about the apparel business. And it's logical, right? Because we're not going out. We don't need the same amount of clothes.
Yeah, yeah. If you bought new clothes in 2021, did you really get to wear it?
That's right. I was looking at my shoes because I don't, I gave away some of my shoes to my annual purge of stuff. And I was saying to myself, dang, I need to polish these shoes. These shoes have been sitting in there for a minute collecting dust. But then at the same time, I was saying, well, I got to polish them. My mind was saying, well, when am I going to wear them? So if I polish them now, when's the next time I'm going to wear them? And so why am I polishing them now? But I was saying to myself, I got all of this stuff. I got this clothes. And I don't want to preview the episode too much, but I got all this stuff and I don't need all of these clothes anymore. But anyway, that's besides the points. There's some interesting ones that are in here. Sports and outdoors. That's interesting. And toys and games. Back to your point about PlayStations and all of that. And obviously groceries are a big thing. I personally, this is another future SB Thriving Business section. I've been to the grocery store more times over the last year than I went the previous year put together, the previous couple of years put together. Because you just need to get groceries more because you're not going to restaurants and all that, so you're cooking more stuff at home.
And just to add to our whole technology bubble thing, we also got to think about students working from home, right?
Yeah,
that also required a huge drive in getting more technology in the hands of youth. So if you look at the New York City DOE alone, the New York City DOE bought over 350,000 iPads to distribute to their students.
Wow.
Over 350,000. That's a lot of iPads. And that was what they bought. That was what they bought after September. That's what they bought for September. That's not even including what they bought in March when the pandemic first started sending students home. So if the DOE is buying that many iPads, and then you got to think about the parents that have their kids that were at home that bought devices for their children to be on. Right. So that's because that's not all the kids. They didn't send it to everybody. That was to the students that were in need. Right. So this is like 1.2 million students in the DOE system. So there's a whole lot of parents that had to buy tech. Right. And that's just New York City. Right. We're not even talking about the nation. Right. We're not even talking about New York City and Long Island and Westchester. Right. We're just talking about New York City. So, you can think that this is like there was a huge demand for all that stuff. I mean, it's very, very interesting. So for a lot of companies that there's two ways to look at it to say like, so if I'm Apple and I post gains on a year like last year, can I maintain that level of purchases? But, it's like,
Well, I think the thing that's interesting is that there's this macroeconomic factors that go into all of this. So you think about Generation Z who have lived through the pandemic and they've already been technologically inclined. Are they going to continue to use this kind of technology? The answer is yes. In a few years, they're going to, them plus the millennials, the one before them. I always struggle saying that. I don't know why.
Millennials.
Yeah, I don't know why I was millennials. But anyway, those two generations are going to be bigger than everybody else. So like our generation is by far the smallest. And yes, despite your youth, you are in my generation. And so
no, we're in two different generations. I think you're like Y and I'm like Z or something like that. I don't know. We're in two different generations.
We're both in Generation X. As anyone born between 19.
I'm like Y.
Anyone born between 1964 and 1980 is in Generation X. People out there, when you see this, fact check me on that, but I think I'm pretty confident that that is Generation X. Anyone
Yeah,
born between
fact check that. I think I'm in Generation Y or something.
Generation Y is my 22-year-old son is in Generation Y. I was
Generation
born
Z.
anyone between 19. Oh no, you're right. Generation Y, I think, is between. It ends in 1996. Anyone born between 1980 and 1990 something is millennials. Those that's that generation.
Mm.
And then Generation Z, which my son is in, that's 1996 on. Like your daughter, I don't know what they call that generation. I don't know what they call her generation.
I don't know. They're probably just as frustrated as we have been with the millennials. They're probably just going to come up with a name like the Jerks.
I think they should start over. Call them Generation A. Just start over. Just start them all over. Because I don't know who came up with those. I don't know who came up with the XYZ anyway. I don't like the way that sounds. XYZ sounds like it's the end. It sounds like, so I don't like that whole concept.
It's over.
Yeah, it's the end of the generations. No, it's not. It's just the beginning. That's not cool.
That's so weird.
So this has been an episode of Surviving Business. We talked about today the Tesla versus Auto America. I thought that was a fantastic conversation. If you have a business entity out there, we gave you some guidance in regards to how you should start that, what you should think about doing that. So please replay this over and over and over again. If you find value in anything that we says, please do all the stuff, subscribe, like, all that, so we can keep sharing this with more people. David, tell some last comments for the folks out there. What's some comments you got for people?
All right. So remember, you're starting off a business. Don't let the entity be your blocker, right? Blockers are those things that stop you from doing what you need to do. Move forward. Establish an entity that works for you at the time. If that's just being a sole proprietor, don't worry about it. Move forward. As you move forward in your business, guess what? You're going to learn stuff and you're going to figure it out. At some point, you may become an LLC. At some point, you may become a C Corp or an S Corp. Who knows? But don't allow for it to stop you from achieving your goals or your dreams.
That's awesome. So have fun with it. You know, if you have a business and you have something that you're trying to create, whether it's a service or a product, and it's a chore, it's something that's bogging you down, don't do it. You can get a regular job and do that and have something that bogs you down. Don't do that. Do something that's going to make you excited, that it's a calling for you, that every single morning when you wake up, you go, yo, I am so glad I'm doing this. I know it's going to be a slog. I'm going to have some crazy customers. I'm going to have some stuff I've got to learn, something I got to do. But if it's giving you energy, if your business gives you energy, then you got the right business. If it ain't giving you energy, then you might have to think about something else. If you do it that way and you think about the energy it gives you, you're going to get paid. You're going to make money. You're going to make money in a way that's valuable to you. Money that you're going to say, this money is the right amount of money for what I'm trying to do in life. So this has been Surviving Business. Next episode, you'll hear us talk more about some awesome businesses that we have out there. We're going to talk about amusement parks because it's getting springtime. And so we're going to talk about that. And it's going to be a lot of fun talking about that. So this is Winston. Here's my sound effect for today. Bam. That's a bad one. That was horrible. That was very bad. Bam, bam. Yo, super sound effect. Bam, boom. I'm going to put some music on the final cut. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be like a Snyder cut. It's going to be fantastic. You're going to love it. It's going to be awesome. Dave. Dave. All right. Thank you all. Get down. Hit us up. We love you. Get your business going and have a fantastic time in this life.